home inspection nightmares. That's a good hook, right? Well, today we're going to be talking about some of the things we've seen over the years with home inspections, and we can't wait to share those with you. So stay tuned to this episode of The Den.
The Den, powered by the Lyons Group, a show dedicated to exploring hot topics in real estate, local happenings, and industry trends. We're a small team of professionals approaching $400 million in sales and nearly 2,000 local transactions. You're listening to time-tested experts and industry leaders. Here's a refreshing look at real estate happenings and more. Welcome to The Den.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Den, and it's powered by the Lyons Group. We're excited to see you today and talk with you about a fun one, home inspection nightmares. And we're going to share some stories with you from over the years, what we've seen. But before I get to that, let me introduce my partners, my friends, the Lyons Group. To my left, Paul, hand me the rock, Barry, Melissa, let's go, Glasgow, Aspen, the Ninja Gruen, and Shannon, the boss, Martin Martinez. My name is Ben Lyons. Welcome to this episode of The Den. And we are top brokers taking on tough questions. And today it's not really questions, it's more of like stories. So horror stories of home inspections. Hopefully you as a viewer can learn from some of these, or at least go, holy cow, at least I didn't have to deal with that. I mean, it gives you some perspective. Anyways, if you've bought or sold recently and have had a home inspection, you know how nitpicky they can be. Well, sometimes nitpicky is a good thing. So, Shannon, you want to kick us off with a story on home inspection that you remember having?
Sure.
Oh my gosh.
Over the years, there's been a lot of interesting home inspections, but I think one that came to my mind immediately when we started talking about this subject was a property that was in the country club. And of course that, you have some really nice homes up in the country club and you don't expect to find anything too outrageous there. The house was vacant and it was a foreclosure. And it was one of those things walking through the house, you really didn't notice anything in particular. Most homes that are vacant, you'll find have, maybe some bugs or things like that. They get in, they die. They really stand out because there's nothing else in the house. But the home inspector is going to look at every aspect of the house. They're going to be up in the attic. They're going to be in the crawl space. They're going to be in areas that the average homeowner doesn't look, and you don't know what's going on in that house. And when the home inspector went in the crawl space of the house, it was discovered that there was an entire bee colony, a beehive. Not only had they built a hive there, they had covered the entire under portion of the house, all of the floor joisting and everything, with honey. So it was dripping off of the floor joists. It was covering everything. And of course, there's a lot of angry bees there that don't want you in their house. So
it was a sweet deal.
It was,
right?
Right. Yeah.
I couldn't resist. I had to do that.
Some you have to leave alone, Ben.
Yeah.
Well, you would think that it would be a sweet deal, but who really wants to buy a house, let's be honest, that's covered in honey? Not only do you have to deal with the bees because you don't want them living in your home, you also have to deal with the fact that, how much damage is that doing to the wood of that house? How many other secondary issues are you going to have with bugs? Even if you remove the bees from the house, now you have a whole other issue with
vermin,
ants.
Yeah. I was like, my husband would say ants.
Ants,
right?
Yeah, ants.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
You would imagine there's a large food source there for animals that are going to come in.
Rodents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I believe, and it's been a while. We were trying to refresh our memory on this, but I believe it's been a while. But we did have to professionally have someone go in there, remove the hive, and then have everything professionally cleaned under there, which I will tell you, is not cheap and is not easy.
Yes.
And, I would guess that probably was there even when the house wasn't vacant, which is another good reason why I tell people always get a home inspection. People think that you're finding out things that the sellers don't want to tell you. The truth is you're probably finding out things that the sellers wouldn't even know.
That's such a good
How
point.
often are you peeking in your crawl space? How often are you peeking in your attic? How often, are you really looking at things on the top of your roof? You're not.
Yeah.
You're not. So it's good to have that second look and know those things. If those people had bought that and just thought, hey, this is a great deal. The house looks really good in condition. We're not worried about too many things. Could you imagine if they had done that and closed afterwards?
Oh my gosh.
The nightmare that would have ensued for them. Luckily, it was just a nightmare for the bank.
Yeah. When you were telling me that earlier, it refreshed my memory on that property. But yeah, all of the honey and all of the infestation that could have been or was there, I mean, it would have been just a terrible mess if they wouldn't have discovered that.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a nightmare.
Yeah.
That's a nightmare.
Well, and you see in Texas, right? Like sometimes, gosh, I've seen some videos where people there's honey coming down the walls.
Yeah.
Right. And they have they pull out full colonies that are, the honeycomb itself is 8 foot tall and big problem. And
if nobody's minding it, if they're not being disturbed, they'll just keep living there. They'll keep growing. They'll keep thriving. Who knows how much they would have taken over even if people were living there before people inside actually noticed.
Because we showed the home. We showed the home. The offer was written.
Never would have.
Never knew. We didn't hear a humming. There wasn't any.
No indication that was going on in there.
That is pretty incredible. Get your home inspection. Get someone.
Absolutely.
If it's not a home inspector, get your husband in the crawl space or a significant other in the crawl space. Paul, talk to us about inspection nightmares.
Well, this is a recent one. We had a home inspection scheduled on a house that had just been renovated, and it's a flat roof house, and we don't get a lot of snow out here. So we scheduled a home inspection, and just so happened the night before, it snowed. And enough snow on the roof so they couldn't see all aspects of the roof. So they get the home inspection. Obviously, the roof was not inspected. So they gave us a long list of repairs. We negotiated through the repairs. We got some of the things done. They called the inspector to go back out to see what was done. And at that point, the snow had melted. And they said there was about 3 inches of standing water on the roof. So the roof had a drainage problem.
Ooh, just for the listeners to know, if you have standing water on your roof, usually not a good thing.
Usually not. Yeah. in this case, it wasn't either.
Yeah.
But they had a couple of roofers go out. One guy said, of course, the whole roof needs to be replaced. The other one said there's about $2,500 worth of repairs. So the seller said, we've already done a pretty good price reduction. We're not going to do anything. So then we closed about 3 days later, and the buyer didn't go back before closing, which I highly recommend. If you're going to buy a property, know what's going to happen within that day before closing. So if something happens, that you can address it before it's your problem now. Mm-hmm. But they didn't do that. So we signed, the buyer and seller both signed. It got the check cleared. It was recorded at the county. They go in to take a look at the house, and in the master bedroom, the roof had failed. Oh, geez. All down the wall, water had been coming in for who knows how long. The paint had all bubbled. That whole wall, the drywall, was all soaking wet. So they called me up and says, we know we've signed, it's recorded, but just to let you know.
Just so you know,
since your sellers didn't fix that roof, here's what happened.
Yeah.
So we called the contractor, and he ended up warrantying it, so it was a good thing. But I would say make sure that you can get to all aspects of the house. If you can't get to the roof, make sure you extend so you can get to the roof at a later time. Mm-hmm. And then do your walkthroughs. Yes,
do your walkthroughs. And I'm going to parlay on that. But before I do that, I want to say, this is why Paul is a great realtor, because a lot of times people get those calls after closing, right? And we've literally heard realtors say, welcome to home ownership. Yeah.
Not my problem.
It's not my problem type of thing. And we've gotten calls over the years, Shannon, from, just simple leaks under the sink all the way to stuff like that. And not once have we ever said, well, welcome to home ownership. It's always, hey, we want to work with those customers, make sure that they're happy. And kudos to you for doing that, stepping up, making the call to the contractor and getting right back in the middle of it when you could have just said, hey, it's not my problem anymore. Welcome to home ownership. So thank you for being a professional, because that's what steps up our industry. Mm-hmm, and we want to highlight that as realtors. So I know you're shocked, right?
Usually you guys bag on me through these things. Thank you.
Okay, someone get a ball cap. We got to keep his head down a little bit. Melissa, you got any stories to share with some? I know you're probably having to dig deep and think about some of these.
I don't know if I've blocked it out because it was so bad or what, but I can't really think of much of anything that's been so crazy. Except for one. It was one here in the middle of town. We were there for the final, the walkthrough at the end with the inspector. The buyer was there and I was there with him. And the inspector takes me aside and he's like, hey, look at this underneath the house. And it's a bone, like a big bone. And I was like,
wow. Like it looked like a femur or?
Kind of.
Wow.
So I was like, so do we call the police?
First,
What do we do?
yeah.
Right? Exactly. And so I had some connections. I called a police officer friend who came, took a look at it. And to that person, it was very clear that it was like an animal, right? Which is okay. It's just fine. But what's interesting is a lot of these houses kind of in the area where our office is are very old. Mm-hmm. And there have been many things here before they built the houses. You know, there's orchards here and everything else. So there was actually a lot of bones. So it was probably some sort of a slaughter place. So.
Yeah. Maybe.
My buyer was 100% unfazed, didn't care. He's like, no.
Yeah. Oh.
To him, it was also, that's not human. I'm like, okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're cool with it. Because I have a small background. I was like, I think maybe we should call somebody out. You know?
Yeah.
This could be a crime scene.
Yeah.
Right.
It could, yeah. Very well. Oh my gosh.
Well, that's all I could think of.
Yeah. I mean, that's still a good one though. I mean, because you would want to know, because some people would bother them.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Wouldn't it like, you know, especially if someone has passed in the home, some people it doesn't bother.
Yeah.
But the other people, it does. And there's religious beliefs behind it and whatnot. Now, just for the record, as realtors, we're not required to disclose if someone has passed in the home. But I just I don't know how you guys handle this. You can chime in. I mean, it's personal preference. I kind of do the don't ask, don't tell. Like I don't, unless it's something that's egregious, like something really crazy happened there. Then I definitely want to, because you always get the neighbor.
Like the neighbors.
The neighbor always like the neighbor shows up and is like, hey dude, did you know like this went down, you know, in this house? And they're like, oh my gosh, thanks realtor for telling me. I kind of have the don't ask, don't tell. What are your guys' thoughts on that? That part of it? Just,
I think if a buyer specifically asks, then, you know, I'll ask the listing agent, but that's not on my top, you know, list of questions when going to a listing consultation. And by the way, has anybody died here?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's,
right.
Natural causes or otherwise.
Yeah.
Right?
It's not something, unless it's like something that's been on the news, but you know what's great about San Juan County? Doesn't happen very often here.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Yep. And I've had people over the years specifically ask me like, will you ask them? Like, I just want to know. Like, and that's with every home that they looked at. Like, I just want to know before we make an offer. I just want to know. So in situations like that, obviously, and then that's totally fine. But for our viewers, just so you know, it's not a requirement for a realtor to ask those questions or disclose, even if they know. Obviously, my personal take is that I would if I knew and I thought it was relevant to the situation. But back to the horror story, inspection horror story, Aspen.
I'm with Melissa.
Any femurs or
no femurs? I just can't. I couldn't think of anything. Even if an inspection comes back, just like should be demolished. I'm like, well, there you go.
Yeah.
like,
you spent $600 and not $120.
Yeah, that's right. It is cheap insurance.
I'm just like, is that something you want to fix? Is it something? Because you can fix almost anything.
Yeah.
So I never really get too worried about inspections. But I was thinking there was this person who was doing. It was our first time meeting him. It was a vacant house. I went out there and he was doing his own inspection on the first time he'd ever looked at this house. And he's looking and like literally like has like a screwdriver. I was like, oh, you can't take stuff. Like he was going to unscrew like the electrical and he was opening up the crawl space, which totally fine. If you want to peek your head in there, you go ahead. And he's like, come can you come look? I was like, you're not getting me. So at the last office I was at, I'm going to throw this person under the bus. I was telling the story and she goes, it was Kelsey. She goes, I've gone under the house before with someone. And I was like, oh my gosh, don't ever do that.
She needs a realtor safety course.
She did. And she got all straightened out that day. But it was just funny because I was telling the story and you see her just over there like, maybe you shouldn't have done that.
And to Kelsey's credit, she's like, let's do it.
Oh, she did. She was in there. She was like, going for it. She's like, let's figure it out. Great person, great realtor. And we'll obviously go the extra mile for you as well.
We'll go the extra mile. But we've had people like pull their ladder out. I'm like, I'm going to crawl on the roof. I'm like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
You're not getting on that roof. I mean, and then you fall and you hurt yourself. And then whose responsibility is it? Or your leg goes through the roof and then you don't end up buying it. Yep. So like just for the viewers to understand, like it's not carte blanche. You don't get to bring your ladder and a screwdriver and start sticking it in the walls because you feel like that's what needs to be done. That's what you hire an inspector for.
So I actually have a story about not hiring an inspector. It was my own.
Okay, let's hear this.
Like I said, since we don't get very worked up or worried about stuff, at the last house we bought, it was a for sale by owner. And honestly, the seller was really, really hard to work with. And we really wanted the house and we had something else fall through. So we kind of had to move. So we get the house under contract. We do a termite inspection, but we don't do a full inspection because the house is newer. We'd known the people that had built it. My father-in-law had actually built the house, and we knew the people that lived there until these last people. So we were not super worried. But the first night we got in there, my daughter's room is right above our primary bedroom, and she gets in the shower, and in my bedroom, I just see water just pouring out of our light socket. And I looked at my husband and I was like, don't tell my dad. Because we didn't get an inspection. And luckily it was a super easy, quick fix. No big deal. Yeah. But yeah, probably should have got that inspection.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And sometimes you can't avoid it. We closed on a house with a wonderful family, and they did a walk. They did everything right. We did a home inspection. We did a walkthrough. We ran water at the walkthrough, flushed toilets, and they close. They go and they move into the home. And the next day they called me and said, Ben, we have water coming out of our lights in the ceiling. And I went, what? And so somehow between the home inspection and the walkthrough, a pipe slipped, and they took a long shower and the water came pouring out of the ceiling. I mean, it was a terrible mess. But they did everything right. Like we did. We were very diligent about it. Sometimes you just can't help those things. They just happen. So, but I've got two to share, and we've got a couple of minutes. So I'm going to share both of these. But one of them was a house, and these buyers were using a loan program. I believe it was an FHA or a VA. I can't remember, but they're a little bit more particular about the property. When you do an FHA or a VA loan, the appraiser actually acts as some sort of an inspector as well. They look for specific things. Usually they're more involved with the safety components. Well, this one was flagged because, we've all seen the popcorn ceiling, right? They're sprayed in the 70s or 80s. Well, if you see the little shimmer in the popcorn, did you know this? That is asbestos, most likely. And so I didn't realize that at the time. And so we went through, it was an older home. It was one of those ones that were very, very well taken care of, single owner, for 50 years. And come to find out, this is, flagged as for asbestos. So for 2 weeks, we went back and forth on how, because when you do asbestos remediation, you have to seal up the hallway. They have to come in hazmat suits, and, they have to do everything in between. We went back and forth with the lender and with the seller and the buyer. And finally I think it was midnight one night. I'm like Googling asbestos ceilings. You remember this, Shannon? She's laughing. And I was like, and I was dealing with a contractor, and he kept coming back with all kinds of different things. In fact, we had a couple contractors, and I read you can paint over it and just basically encapsulate it. And so I just asked the contractor, we went from a $20,000 bid. I said, can't we just paint over it and encapsulate it if everyone's good with that? And he's like, oh yeah, sure. So 2 weeks of grinding, right? And people in tears and everything in between. And it came down to a solution of we could just paint and encapsulate it. Now, I don't recommend that for everybody. Everybody was agreeable. It satisfied the VA FHA box, but you remember that all too well. I was stressing about that deal for a couple of weeks, but so that was one. And thank goodness they flagged it, because you wouldn't want to be in a situation where they're like, oh, let's get rid of this popcorn. Yeah. And they
just
didn't.
Scraping it down with the paint.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And
just breathing it in. Right. Yeah. Terrible situation. So, thank goodness that appraiser flagged that for the well-being of that buyer. But here's one, you'll remember this one as well, Shannon, a good friend of ours. And I'm going to call her Alicia. She bought this home. This was almost, this is almost 20 years ago.
In Aztec, yeah.
And she buys this home in Aztec, and she's a young gal, at the time. And we go through and we order in a home inspection. The inspector goes out, and the seller had called to have the utilities on, or didn't have the utilities on. I think the electric was on, but not the water. So the inspector goes, hey, not all the utilities are on, but I've done, what I can with what I've got. And she said, well, I think we're good. I don't need him to go back out and get another inspection on it. He checked basically everything. Well, what the inspector did, because the water wasn't on, first thing they do is they walk through the house and they turn all the water on. So they open all the faucets. Well, he opened the faucet and he plugged the drain, because you want to see it, Yeah. And so we go to closing, we close, and she calls to have utilities put in her name, and she drives out to Aztec, and she calls me and she says, Ben, there's water pouring out of the garage. it had flooded the whole. So the water kicked back on because he left the faucets open. The stopper was down.
Plugged.
It was plugged, and it flooded the entire house. And she didn't do a walkthrough at that time. And I don't know if it would have mattered because they turned the utilities on. And at the time, Aztec, when they turned the utilities on, they didn't sit there and watch it spin because no one was home. They just turned it on and left. Yeah. Like nowadays, they'll turn it on, and if it's spinning and no one's home, they'll shut it off.
Yeah, you have to be there nowadays.
Yeah. So, I mean, and there's a reason why, because situations like that happen. But yes, so she's a brand new homeowner, a young gal, and she just walked to her, her home she just bought, and it was completely flooded. And I said, Alicia, what do you want me to do? And she goes, I'll call the insurance company. And she called the insurance company, and they took care of it. And it was
insurance covered all of it.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I don't remember us having a problem with which insurance, because a lot of times if it's during that transition period, you will have insurances fighting over it and saying, well, you can't prove it was during our time. Well, you can't prove it was during our time, because they're trying to limit their liability as well. But we didn't have any issue with that. It did get covered. Yeah.
And not that we should just say, throw it on the insurance company. But that was kind of her. She was like, we'll take it. I mean, she was just super easy-going. I was like panicked. I know Shannon was.
We
were just like,
sure, the inspector was.
Oh, yeah. We had some. We had a conversation with the inspector. And, the inspectors do what they can. There was no ill intention there. No. But just one of those wild things. So do your walkthroughs.
That's the moral of the story.
Yes.
Right.
Do your inspections. Allow the appraiser, when it's appropriate, to do their thing. I mean, obviously you can't stop them, but you don't want to disregard what people are telling you, especially if this is oftentimes the biggest purchase that people make in their lives. So do your due diligence. I mean, we do more due diligence buying a microwave nowadays than sometimes people buy homes. You're studying reviews and this, that, and that. You spend hours. So do your due diligence there. So let's get to the speed round real quick. And we'll start with Paul. What is the biggest area of concern when getting a home inspection? What do you think? Is it plumbing? Is it electrical, roof? What is it? Siding, foundation?
Well, in all my properties, it's been water. Anything that has to do with water. So I would say I've replaced main lines. I've replaced drain lines, the line from your cleanouts to the street. Water does a lot of damage, and it's hard to stop once it gets going. And if you're not there to stop it right away, and insurance does not want to pay. That's one thing. Mm-hmm. So I would say anything that is currently leaking, make sure it stops. And if there are roofs that need some work in the winter, make sure and get them checked.
Get them checked. Great advice. Melissa, what are your thoughts? Biggest area of concern for a home inspection?
Well, your home inspector is general. And so if you are really concerned about the age of the roof, get a roofer out there to do an inspection on that. Mm-hmm. So I think that in my experience, probably the last 6 months or so, buyers have been really worried about roofs. I would say, let's get somebody out there that's a roofing contractor and have them take a look at it. And there are many in town who are phenomenal. They'll go out there and they'll do a roofing inspection, not looking for, you have to replace this whole thing.
Right.
You can have an ugly roof, but it still be functional.
Sure.
So that's what I would say is dive even deeper into your inspectors.
That really is a great point, Melissa. And to everyone that's listening, the whole point of a home inspection is for someone to raise flags, right? Because the home inspector is not a licensed electrician. They're not a licensed plumber, not a licensed roofer. In many regards, they're not licensed in those capacities. Their sole job is to raise the flag of awareness. Your job as a buyer is to dig down on that and say, what's the cost going to be? What's the real problem here? Has this been an issue before? So keep that in mind. They are not the end all be all. They are the flag raiser. Okay. Aspen, what are your thoughts? Biggest area of concern when getting a home inspection?
Any and all. Anything can be expensive. I mean, you could have a sewer line that's completely blocked. You could need a whole roof repaired. That's why you get the general home inspection, so you know who to call out. Just like we're not a master of all trades, I can't tell you everything about lending. I can tell you some of the basics. I mean, it's the same with an inspector. You can't expect them to tell you this is what it is, this is what's going to cost. So I agree with Melissa. Use the general home inspection to get someone out there. And if there's a bunch of big trees in the yard, probably get the sewer line scoped. There's things that we also have seen and that we can help you look for that, hey, you might want to look into getting this as well. So just because we have seen so many inspections and so many things come through. So any and all things can be a really big problem. I think anything cosmetic, though, just move past it. And if it's like you need to replace the faucet, maybe don't focus too much in on that. Focus on the bigger issues, the expensive fixes.
Great point. Great point. Shannon.
So I'm with you. Anything can be really a major issue. I think that's the good thing about the general home inspection, because you don't know if it is the landscape that is going to cause your big problem, or if it is the main sewer line that's going to cause your big problem. So get all of it looked at, and take all of it seriously. And yes, don't focus on the small stuff. Look at health, safety, structural issues.
Yes.
That, in my opinion, is what the home inspection's for. It's not because, the paint's peeling over in this corner, I want the room repainted. That's not really what your home is. They are going to point that out.
Yeah.
They're going to point out every little flaw. But really you need to focus on the health, safety, and structural issues.
Yes, I think that's such a great point. And also I want to parlay on that in the sense that sometimes buyers use the home inspection as, I'm going to try to upgrade things. But if you have a perfectly good furnace that's older, you don't just get to upgrade it. It's working fine. So bear that in mind as a buyer if you're looking at, the health and safety components, but also your team, right? Your lender, your home inspector, your realtor, like you just said about the bigger trees. Sometimes the home inspector is not going to point out that there's bigger trees at the edge of the lot. But as a realtor, we may say, you may want to think about the sewer line because we've had a lot of issues with the roots around here. And so it's a whole team that's helping educate you through that process. But don't be someone that just,
don't be me.
Don't gloss it over. It's totally fine. It's, and I to sum that up, my thought would be that, I think anything could be a major issue. Structural is probably one of my biggest concerns. You can fix a lot of things. Fixing structural is a major issue if it's really a problem. But I always tell my wife, I'm like, I feel like I was a crooked plumber in my previous life because we have had anything with water. Yeah, with water especially. Anytime there's water can be a terrible situation if it's not done right. So on to my favorite part of the podcast, and we're going to talk about the Lyons Pride. And as the Lyons Group, we roll our sleeves up in the community. We do what we can to make our community a better place to live. We take a lot of pride in that, and we want to expand the pride and highlight those individuals that have done great things over the years, those entities, those events, those organizations, those individuals that have really rolled their sleeves up in this area, made our community better. And today it's my turn. So we round robin and it's back to me, which is fantastic. I do want to highlight a special lady, special near and dear to our hearts. Shannon, especially. She's one of your best friends. She's like a mother figure to me. Sherry Work. She is what we would call an OG. She's the original realtor when I got into the business in the early 2000s. She really took me down and took me under her wing and helped with my professionalism. She helped me understand how to deal with difficult conversations, how to hit things head on, how to be transparent, how to be honest. Now, I knew all of those things, but putting it together and making it really a package deal when you're working with a really good realtor, those things all come together for you. And I got to give a lot of credit to Sherry. I mean, wouldn't you say, Shannon, she's just a special.
She definitely raised us right.
She did. She did. And there was times where she'd say, we need to talk. And we would have the sit down, and I owned the company at the time. And so she would she was the veteran realtor there, and I was a young realtor, but I owned the company. And she'd go, we need to have a sit down. And I go, okay, all right, where do we? Yeah, yes, ma'am. Yeah. Do you want to sit on this side of the desk, or do you want me? But a fantastic lady, Sherry. Just know that we love you. We appreciate you. All you've done for the industry over the years. You helped get the board to where it is in the early 2000s, and we've carried that tradition forward. So hopefully you're proud of what we've done. We just want to tell you we love you and we appreciate all you've done for this community, this profession, and our industry. So thank you for that. Next episode is going to be an interesting one. We're going to talk about industries here locally and what we can expect. We've been tied to the oil and gas industry and tourism up north in the Durango area for a lot of years. what does that complexion look like moving forward? How has it changed over the years? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. It's going to be a fun episode because the future and the complexion of this area has changed quite a bit. And I think it's going to be an interesting topic to talk about. So that's next episode. You can contact any one of the Lyons Group by going to sjcbroker.com. All of our contact information is there. Reach out to one of us. If you're needing help buying or selling a property, we'd love to work with you. We do residential or commercial. And we would love to sit down and have a consultation. If you'd like a free buyer or seller's guide, we have some fantastic guides. Shoot us an email, shoot us a message, and we'll get back with you with one of those. It's a free guide that we'd like to hand out. And also, if you'd like to see a specific topic that you want us to talk about here at the Den, we'd love to jump in on that. And we're always looking for great topics to discuss here locally. So thank you for tuning into this episode. I hope it was a fun one for you, entertaining. And until next time, we'll see you at the Den.
Thank you for listening to The Den, powered by the Lyons Group. Hit the subscribe button to keep informed on real estate happenings. If you'd like to learn more about the Lyons Group, visit sjcbroker.com. Complex markets require complex strategies. The Lyons Group can give you a true advantage in any market. Whether you're buying or selling, residential or commercial, contact us directly at sjcbroker.com. We're time-tested experts with a client-first approach, and we'll see you next time in the Den.